My vow was real. Yours was temporary.
In my experience, welcome home banners are just prelude to disaster. I should have known something was wrong when Tessa hung one across our kitchen doorway after her 3-month medical mission to Africa. My wife never did anything that cheerful without an ulterior motive. Nick, you're being paranoid, I told myself, standing in our Riverside General Hospital parking lot, staring at the text she'd sent. Emergency room? Come now. Don't panic, don't panic. Right. Because nothing says everything's fine, like your infectious disease specialist wife texting you from the ER 2 days after returning from Uganda. I'm Nick Ellery, 41 years old, and I run IT security for Riverside General's entire network. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and gives me access to more hospital gossip than a soap opera writer could handle. My wife, Dr. Tessa Ellery, is the kind of doctor who volunteers for dangerous missions, saves lives, and makes me look like a slacker for complaining about server crashes. We've been married 16 years. We have 2 kids, Maddie, 15 and sharp as a razor, and Will, 13 and happiest when buried in video games. Until this week, I thought we had a good marriage. Not perfect, but solid. I was about to learn how wrong a man can be. The ER was buzzing with its usual controlled chaos when I arrived. Nurses rushed between curtained areas, monitors beeped, and somewhere a child was crying. I found Tessa in bed 7, looking pale and exhausted. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore that thin hospital gown that makes everyone look vulnerable. "Hey," I said, taking her hand. "What's going on?" "Probably nothing serious," she said, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "I've been having some symptoms since I got back. Dr. Martinez wants to run some tests." "What kind of symptoms?" "Just, fever, fatigue. Could be anything I picked up over there." Dr. Elena Martinez appeared at that moment, clipboard in hand, and wearing the expression doctors get when they're about to deliver news nobody wants to hear. I'd seen it enough times working in the hospital. "Mrs. Ellery, we need to discuss your test results," she said, glancing at me. "Would you prefer to speak privately?" "Nick can hear whatever you have to say," Tessa replied, squeezing my hand. Dr. Martinez pulled up a chair. "The good news is it's not any of the tropical diseases we were concerned about. No malaria, no Ebola, nothing like that." "That's great," I said. "So what is it?" "The tests show you have chlamydia, Mrs. Ellery. It's completely treatable with antibiotics, but we need to discuss contact tracing and treatment for your partner." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt Tessa's hand go rigid in mine. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say. "Chlamydia is an infection that's transmitted through intimate contact," Dr. Martinez continued, apparently not noticing that my world was currently imploding. "Since you've been intimate with your wife, you'll need to be tested and likely treated as well." I stared at Tessa. She was looking at the ceiling, tears running down her cheeks. "There has to be a mistake," I said. "We've been together for 16 years. I haven't been with anyone else, and Tessa was in Africa doing medical work." The silence stretched out until it became unbearable. Dr. Martinez cleared her throat. "I'll give you 2 some time to talk," she said, standing. "The nurse will bring discharge papers and prescriptions. Mr. Ellery, please make an appointment for testing as soon as possible." After she left, I sat in that plastic chair staring at my wife of 16 years, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of what I'd just heard. "Nick," she finally whispered. "How?" The word came out harsher than I intended. "I don't know. Maybe the testing was wrong, maybe." "Tessa." I stood up, suddenly needing distance between us. "How did you get chlamydia in Uganda?" She closed her eyes. "There was this doctor, Owen Grant. He was part of the mission team." Owen Grant. I knew that name. He worked at Riverside General in cardiology. Married guy, 2 kids, always bragging about his golf game at hospital functions. "You had an affair," I said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. We were so far from home, working 18-hour days, people were dying, and he was just there. I was lonely, Nick. You have no idea what it was like. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. You were lonely. For 3 months you were lonely, so you decided to sleep with a married colleague and bring home a souvenir. Don't be crude. Crude? I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to me. My wife cheats on me, lies to me, and potentially exposes me to infections people usually get through intimacy, but I'm the one being crude. It was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake. I love you, Nick. I love our family. Yeah, well, you've got a funny way of showing it. I left her there in the ER and walked out to my truck. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. 16 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, shared dreams, inside jokes, and she threw it all away for some cardiology hotshot in a refugee camp. If she wanted to bring something back from Africa, why couldn't it have been a giraffe? I drove home in a daze, trying to figure out how to tell Maddie and Will that their mother was a cheating liar without actually using those words. They were both in the living room when I walked in, Maddie doing homework at the kitchen table, Will playing some zombie game on his laptop. "Where's Mom?" Maddie asked. "She texted that you were picking her up from the hospital." "She's fine," I said. "Just some routine tests. She'll be home later." Both kids looked at me with that suspicious expression teenagers perfect around age 12. They knew something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to blow up their world. Not yet. "I'm ordering pizza for dinner," I announced. "On a Tuesday?" Will looked up from his game. "Are you dying?" "Not yet," I said, "but the day's not over." I went upstairs to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed Tessa and I had shared for over a decade. Everything looked the same. Her jewelry box on the dresser, the stack of medical journals on her nightstand, the framed photo of our family from last Christmas. But it was all different now. Contaminated. My phone buzzed with a text from Tessa. "Coming home in an hour. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Yes, we do." But talking was the last thing I wanted to do. What I wanted was answers. Real answers. Not whatever sanitized version Tessa was planning to feed me. I pulled out my laptop and did something I'd never thought I'd do in my marriage. I started investigating my wife. I knew a guy who knew a guy. In my line of work, that's how things get done. The guy I knew was Mason Greeley, a former Riverside police detective who'd gone private after a disagreement with the department about evidence handling procedures. The guy he knew was whoever Mason needed to know to get information. Mason's office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a Chinese restaurant, which should have been depressing, but somehow felt appropriate. Everything about my life had taken a turn toward the seedy side of town. "So your wife brought home more than malaria from her African adventure," Mason said, leaning back in a chair that squeaked like a rusty gate. He was thin, gray-haired, and had the kind of face that had seen too much but still found it all mildly amusing. "Chlamydia, actually. And she claims it was just one guy, just a mistake." "And you don't believe her?" "I don't know what to believe. 3 days ago, I thought I had a solid marriage. Now I'm sitting in a private investigator's office trying to figure out if my wife is a serial cheater or just spectacularly stupid." Mason pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. "Tell me about this Owen Grant. Cardiologist at Riverside General. Married, 2 kids, plays golf, drives a BMW, lives in Oakwood Heights. That's the expensive part of town. Kids' ages? I don't know. Why does that matter? Everything matters until it doesn't. What else do you know about him?" I realized I didn't know much. Owen was one of those guys who existed on the periphery of hospital social events. Always perfectly dressed, always talking about his latest vacation or golf tournament, always with a drink in his hand and a story about some important patient he'd saved. "He's arrogant," I said. "The kind of guy who assumes everyone wants to hear about his life. Those are often the easiest ones to investigate. They don't think they need to hide anything." Mason made more notes. "What about your wife? Any history of infidelity?" "No. At least, I never suspected anything. She's always been focused on her career, the kids, hospital politics. This came completely out of nowhere. In my experience, affairs don't come out of nowhere. They come out of opportunities and rationalizations. Your wife had both in Africa." I spent the next hour giving Mason everything I could think of. Tessa's schedule, her friends, her habits, access to our financial records. It felt like betraying her, but she'd betrayed me first. "I'll start with the basics," Mason said. "Financial records, phone records if I can get them legally, social media activity. If there's more to this story, we'll find it." "How long will this take?" "Depends on how careful they were. If they're smart, maybe a few weeks. If they're typical cheaters who think they're smarter than they are, maybe a few days." I drove home feeling like I was living someone else's life. The house looked the same, but everything felt different. Tessa's car was in the driveway, and I could see her moving around in the kitchen through the window. She was making dinner like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just blown up our entire family. "Hey," she said when I walked in. She was stirring something on the stove, wearing the apron I'd bought her for Mother's Day 2 years ago. I made that chicken thing you like. Where are the kids? Maddie's at soccer practice. Will's upstairs doing homework. We were alone. Time for the conversation neither of us wanted to have. How long? I asked. Nick, please, how long were you sleeping with Owen Grant? She stopped stirring and turned to face me. 6 weeks, maybe 7. It started about halfway through the mission. And it's over? Of course it's over. We're back home. We both have families. That's not what I asked. I asked if it's over. She hesitated just long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. Yes, she said. It's over. You're lying. I'm not. Tessa, I've been married to you for 16 years. I know when you're lying. You do this thing with your left hand where you touch your wedding ring. You just did it. She looked down at her hand like it had betrayed her. We work at the same hospital, Nick. We can't just pretend the other doesn't exist. But you can pretend I don't exist. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you remembering you had a husband before you decided to play doctor with Owen Grant. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Help me understand how my wife of 16 years accidentally ended up in bed with another man for 7 weeks. She turned back to the stove. You wouldn't understand. Try me. You've never been in a situation like that. Life and death every day. Working with people who understand the pressure, the responsibility. Owen and I, we connected on a level that... Stop! I held up my hand. Just stop. Don't make this about some deep spiritual connection. You cheated. Own it. The front door slammed and Maddie's voice echoed through the house. I'm home! Something smells good! Tessa and I looked at each other. Whatever else was wrong between us, we both wanted to protect our kids from the fallout. We'll finish this later, I said. Nick, I love you. I love our family. This was a mistake, but it doesn't have to destroy everything we've built. I wanted to believe her. Part of me desperately wanted to believe that this was just a terrible mistake, that we could go to counseling and work through it, that in a year we'd look back on this as the rough patch that made our marriage stronger. But I couldn't get past one simple fact. She was still lying to me. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in her voice. There was more to this story, and until I knew what it was, I couldn't even begin to figure out how to move forward. Dinner was a surreal experience. Maddie chattered about soccer practice and some drama with her friends. Will emerged from his room long enough to inhale 2 plates of chicken and rice before disappearing again. Tessa and I made small talk about our days, carefully avoiding anything that mattered. We were a family having dinner together, just like we had hundreds of times before, except everything was different now, and only 2 of us knew it. After the kids went to bed, I found Tessa in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed in her pajamas. I made an appointment with Dr. Martinez for tomorrow, she said. For your testing. Thanks. Nick, what can I do? How can I fix this? I sat down in the chair by the window as far from her as I could get while still being in the same room. Start by telling me the truth. All of it. I have told you the truth. No, you've told me part of the truth. The part you think I can handle, but I'm not some fragile flower, Tessa. I'm your husband and I deserve to know exactly what I'm dealing with. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. There were other people at the mission, other doctors, nurses, aid workers. Sometimes we'd get together after work, have a few drinks, try to decompress from the day. And sometimes things got relaxed. People were far from home under a lot of stress. Boundaries got blurred. I felt that cold, hard feeling in my chest getting bigger. What kind of boundaries? It wasn't just Owen and me. There were other people, other couples. It was like a different world over there. Are you telling me you had closeness with multiple people? I'm telling you that what happened between Owen and me wasn't happening in a vacuum. Everyone was doing things they wouldn't normally do. I stood up and walked to the window. Our backyard looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Will's bike leaning against the garage, Maddie's soccer ball by the back door, the garden Tessa had planted last spring. How many? I asked. Nick, how many people did you sleep with? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. It matters to our marriage. It matters to my health, since apparently I need to get tested for God knows what. She started crying. 3, including Owen. 3, my wife had slept with 3 different people in 7 weeks. People she worked with. People who knew she was married. I want their names, I said. Why? Because I want to know who my wife has been screwing behind my back. Because I want to know if any of them are people I'll have to see at hospital functions. Because I want to know if any of them are married to people I know. Owen Grant, Marcus Webb, and Sarah Chen. Marcus Webb was a surgeon. Sarah Chen was a nurse practitioner. I knew both of them by reputation. Jesus, Tessa. Sarah Chen is married to Tom Chen from radiology. I play poker with Tom once a month. I know. You know? You know. And you did it anyway? It wasn't supposed to come back home with us. It was supposed to stay in Africa. Well, congratulations. You brought home chlamydia instead. I grabbed my pillow from the bed. I'm sleeping in the guest room. Nick, please don't let this destroy our family. I stopped at the door and turned back to her. I'm not the one who destroyed our family, Tessa. You did that all by yourself. My phone rang at 6:30 the next morning. Mason Greeley's name appeared on the screen, which meant he'd either found something interesting or something terrible. In my experience, those were often the same thing. Nick, you awake? I am now. We need to meet. I've got information you're going to want to hear, but not over the phone. How bad is it? Let's just say your wife's African adventure was more comprehensive than she let on. An hour later, I was back in Mason's squeaky chair, holding a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime last week. He had a manila folder on his desk and the expression of a man who'd seen too much of human nature to be surprised by anything. Your wife lied to you, he said, opening the folder. But then again, you already knew that. What did you find? Social media is a beautiful thing for investigators. People post everything thinking they're only sharing with friends, but friends have friends, and those friends have friends, and eventually, everything becomes public if you know where to look. He pulled out a series of printed screenshots from Facebook and Instagram. The photos showed groups of people in what looked like a bar or restaurant, medical personnel from the mission, including Tessa, Owen Grant, and several others I didn't recognize. This is from Dr. Sarah Chen's Instagram account, Mason said, pointing to one photo. Posted 6 weeks ago. Notice anything interesting? I looked closer. Tessa was sitting next to Owen, his arm around her shoulders. She was laughing at something, looking relaxed and happy. But what caught my attention was her left hand. No wedding ring. She took off her ring. Gets better. Look at this one. The next photo showed the same group, but this time Tessa was kissing Owen. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a full-on romantic kiss. The caption read, "What happens in Uganda stays in Uganda. #mission life, #no judgments." There are 12 more photos like this, Mason said. Your wife and Owen, your wife and Marcus Webb, group shots that look more like swapping parties than medical mission team bonding. I stared at the photos, trying to reconcile the woman in them with the wife who'd made me dinner last night, and cried about her mistake. It gets worse, Mason continued. I did some digging into Owen Grant's background. Turns out this isn't his first medical mission. He's been on 6 of them in the past 4 years, and he has a reputation. What kind of reputation? The kind where married nurses and doctors mysteriously end up divorced 6 months after working with him. Owen Grant is a predator, Nick. He specifically targets married women on these missions. And Tessa fell for it. Your wife is a smart woman, but smart people can make stupid decisions when they're manipulated by someone who knows what he's doing. I looked through the rest of the photos. There were images of group dinners, dancing, and what looked like private parties in hotel rooms. In every photo, Tessa looked like a different person. Younger, wilder, completely unlike the responsible mother and doctor I'd been married to for 16 years. There's something else, Mason said. Owen Grant's wife filed for divorce 2 months ago, right before he left for Africa. She knew? Hard to say, but the timing is interesting. Either she found out about his previous affairs, or she suspected what would happen on this mission. Do you have her contact information? I do. But before you go down that road, you need to think about what you want to accomplish here. Are you looking for evidence for a divorce? Are you hoping to save your marriage? Are you planning some kind of revenge? Because the next steps depend on your goals. That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? 24 hours ago, I would have said I wanted to save my marriage. But looking at these photos, seeing the evidence of just how thoroughly Tessa had betrayed not just me, but our entire family, I wasn't sure that was possible anymore. I want the truth, I said. All of it, and I want the people who helped destroy my marriage to face some consequences. Mason smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Now we're talking. Let me make some calls. I spent the rest of the day at work, trying to focus on server maintenance and security updates while my personal life imploded around me. Every time I saw Owen Grant's name in the hospital directory, I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. Around 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Julia Grant, Owen's wife. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. When and where? Coffee shop on 5th Street. 1 hour? Julia Grant was nothing like I'd expected. She was tall, athletic, with short brown hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she didn't have time for nonsense. She was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, nursing a large coffee and looking like she hadn't slept in days. "You must be Nick," she said as I sat down. "You look exactly like Owen described you." "He described me?" "Oh, yes. He had quite a lot to say about Tessa's husband during our last conversation, right before I threw him out of the house." I ordered coffee and studied Julia Grant. She had the same hard expression I'd been wearing for the past 2 days, the look of someone whose world had been turned upside down by a cheating spouse. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Enough. You? More than I wanted to. Your private investigator friend is very thorough." "Mason contacted you?" "This morning. He thought we might have common interests." She pulled out her own manila folder, thicker than the one Mason had shown me. "Owen has been cheating on me for 3 years," she said. "Medical missions, conferences, hospital rotations. I suspected, but I never had proof until I hired my own investigator 6 months ago." She opened the folder and showed me photos that made Mason's collection look tame. Owen with various women in hotel rooms, restaurants, and what appeared to be private parties. Some of the women were wearing wedding rings. "Your wife was just the latest," Julia continued. "But she wasn't the only one on this particular mission." "How many?" "4 that I can prove. Your wife, Sarah Chen, and 2 nurses whose names I don't think you'd recognize." I felt sick. Jesus. Owen has a system. He identifies vulnerable married women, usually ones having problems at home or feeling unappreciated in their careers. He becomes their confidant, their supporter, their escape from reality. And then he seduces them. "Why are you telling me this?" Julia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because I want to destroy him. I want to destroy his career, his reputation, and his ability to hurt other families. And I think you might want the same thing." "What did you have in mind?" "Owen thinks he's untouchable. He thinks his victims will stay quiet to protect their own marriages and reputations. He's counting on shame and fear to keep his secrets safe." But what if they didn't stay quiet? What if their husbands didn't stay quiet? What if the hospital administration found out that one of their cardiologists was using medical missions as his personal hunting ground? I understood what she was suggesting. "You want to expose him. I want to expose all of them. Owen, Sarah Chen, Marcus Webb, and yes, your wife. I want the whole sordid story to come out, and I want them to face real consequences. That would destroy Tessa's career." "Good. She helped destroy my marriage. Fair is fair." I thought about Maddie and Will, about how this would affect them if their mother's affair became public knowledge. Then I thought about the photos, about Tessa's lies, about the fact that she'd exposed me to the kinds of infections people usually don't talk about. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Julia's smile got wider. "Everything you can get me. Phone records, emails, hospital schedules, financial records, anything that proves the scope of what they were doing. And in return? In return, we make sure Owen Grant never destroys another family. And we make sure your wife understands that actions have consequences." I shook Julia's hand, and it felt like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But Tessa had crossed that line first, 7 weeks ago in a refugee camp in Uganda. Now it was time for her to learn what that felt like from the other side. The hospital gala was Riverside General's biggest social event of the year. 200 doctors, nurses, administrators, and board members gathered in the Marriott Ballroom to celebrate another year of saving lives and raising money. I'd attended every year since Tessa and I got married, usually enjoying the open bar and the chance to see my colleagues in something other than scrubs. This year was different. This year, I was hunting. I'd spent 2 weeks gathering evidence with Julia Grant and Mason Greeley. Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between Tessa and Owen. Credit card statements revealing romantic dinners and hotel rooms. Social media posts that painted a picture of a group of medical professionals who'd forgotten they had families back home. But the most damaging evidence was the video. Mason had contacts in the security industry. and one of those contacts had worked for the hotel where the medical mission team had stayed in Uganda. African hotels, it turns out, keep security footage for longer than most people realize, especially when they're catering to international aid organizations. The footage showed exactly what I'd expected and hoped I'd never have to see. My wife of 16 years in a hotel hallway, kissing Owen Grant passionately before disappearing into his room. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 days after she'd arrived in Uganda. 3 days. She'd lasted 3 days before betraying our marriage. "You ready for this?" Julia asked. She was standing next to me at the bar, looking elegant in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Once we do this, there's no going back." "I've been ready since I saw those photos," I said. The plan was simple. Julia would create a distraction by confronting Owen publicly about their divorce. While everyone was focused on that drama, I would approach the group of people who'd been on the Uganda mission, including Tessa, Sarah Chen, and Marcus Webb, and make my own announcement. "There's Owen," Julia said, nodding toward the silent auction tables. Owen Grant looked exactly like what he was, a successful cardiologist who thought he was untouchable. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a tuxedo that fit perfectly, and a smile that suggested he owned the room. He was talking to Dr. Peterson, the chief of cardiology, probably discussing golf or his latest surgical success. "Showtime," Julia said. She walked across the ballroom with the confidence of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I watched as she approached Owen and Dr. Peterson, saw Owen's face change from confusion to alarm as he recognized his soon-to-be ex-wife. "Owen?" Julia said, her voice carrying across the room. "I'm so glad I found you. We need to discuss your settlement offer." "Julia, this isn't the place." "Oh, I think this is the perfect place. All your colleagues are here. They should know what kind of man they're working with." The conversation around them stopped. People began turning to watch, drawn by the promise of drama at what was usually a boring corporate event. "You see," Julia continued, raising her voice, "my husband has been cheating on me for 3 years. Medical missions, conferences, anywhere he can find vulnerable married women to seduce." Owen's face went red. "Julia, please. You're making a scene." "I'm just getting started." That was my cue. I walked over to where Tessa was standing with Sarah Chen and Marcus Webb, all three of them watching Julia's performance with horrified fascination. "Enjoying the show?" I asked. Tessa spun around, startled. "Nick, what are you doing here?" "Same thing as every year, supporting my wife's career." I smiled at Sarah and Marcus. "Hello, Sarah." "Marcus, how was Uganda?" Sarah Chen went pale. Marcus Webb suddenly found his drink very interesting. "Nick," Tessa said quietly, "we should go home." "Actually, I think we should stay. This is just getting interesting." Julia's voice carried across the room. The Uganda mission was just his latest hunting ground. 4 married women, 4 families destroyed so Owen could have his fun. The ballroom was completely quiet now except for Julia's voice. Even the waiters had stopped moving. "I have photos," Julia announced. "I have videos. I have phone records. Would anyone like to see what Dr. Owen Grant does when he's supposed to be saving lives?" "That's enough," Owen said, grabbing Julia's arm. "Don't touch me," Julia snapped, pulling away. "You lost that right when you decided our marriage vows were just suggestions." I turned to Tessa, Sarah, and Marcus. "You know what's funny? I've been coming to these galas for 16 years, and I've never given a speech. But I think tonight's the night." "Nick, don't," Tessa whispered. But I was already walking toward the small stage where the evening speakers had made their presentations. The microphone was still live. "Excuse me," I said, my voice echoing through the ballroom. "I'd like to say a few words about medical missions." 200 faces turned toward me. I saw confusion, curiosity, and, in a few cases, recognition of what was about to happen. "My name is Nick Ellery. I run IT security here at Riverside General, and my wife, Dr. Tessa Ellery, just returned from a medical mission in Uganda." I found Tessa in the crowd. She was standing frozen, her face white with panic. "Medical missions are supposed to be about saving lives, helping people in need, representing the best of what we do as medical professionals. But sometimes they become something else entirely." "Sir," someone said from the back of the room, "this isn't appropriate." "You're right," I said. "What happened in Uganda wasn't appropriate either, but it happened anyway." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "I have photos from the Uganda mission, photos that show our medical professionals engaging in activities that have nothing to do with saving lives." The room was dead silent now. I could see hospital administrators whispering urgently to each other, probably trying to figure out how to stop me. Dr. Owen Grant, Dr. Sarah Chen, Dr. Marcus Webb, and my wife, Dr. Tessa Ellery, turned a medical mission into their personal playground. They betrayed their spouses, their families, and their professional obligations. "That's enough," Dr. Peterson shouted from across the room. "No," I said, "it's not nearly enough. These 4 people destroyed multiple families because they thought they were untouchable. They thought their victims would stay quiet out of shame or fear." I looked directly at Tessa. They were wrong. I stepped away from the microphone and walked off the stage. The ballroom erupted in chaos, people talking, shouting, trying to process what they'd just heard. I saw Owen Grant pushing through the crowd, probably trying to escape. Sarah Chen was crying. Marcus Webb had disappeared entirely. And Tessa was standing in the middle of it all, looking like her world had just collapsed, which, I supposed, it had. Julia appeared at my side. "That was beautiful," she said. "Absolutely beautiful." "It's not over," I said. "No," she agreed. "It's just getting started." The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, the hospital was buzzing with gossip about the Uganda Four and their extramarital adventures. Dr. Peterson called emergency meetings. The medical board launched an ethics investigation, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Nick Ellery?" The voice was crisp, professional, and unfamiliar. Speaking. "This is Rebecca Martinez from Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the allegations you made at the hospital gala." I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. "Mr. Ellery, this is David Chen from the Riverside Tribune. We're running a story about professional misconduct at the hospital, and we'd like your comment." I turned off the phone. Tessa had moved out the night of the gala, taking a suitcase and promising the kids she'd be back soon. She was staying at her sister's house across town, which was probably for the best. I wasn't sure what I might say to her if she tried to come home. The kids were handling it about as well as could be expected, which is to say they were confused, angry, and asking questions I didn't want to answer. "Dad, what did Mom do?" Maddie asked over breakfast Tuesday morning. She was picking at her cereal, her usual teenage appetite replaced by anxiety. "Your mother made some bad decisions while she was in Africa," I said. "Decisions that hurt our family." "Did she cheat on you?" I looked at my 15-year-old daughter who was trying to act tough, but whose eyes were red from crying. She deserved honesty, but she also deserved to be protected from the worst details. "Yes," I said, "she did." "With that doctor from the hospital? The one everyone's talking about?" Word traveled fast in a town the size of Riverside, especially when it involved scandal, lies, and respected community members. "Among others," Maddie nodded like she'd expected that answer. "Are you getting divorced?" "I don't know yet." "Good," she said. "I mean, not good that you might get divorced, but good that you're not just pretending everything's okay. I hate it when parents do that." Will was taking it harder. He'd always been closer to Tessa, and he couldn't understand why she'd left. I'd tried to explain without going into details, but 13-year-old boys aren't known for their emotional sophistication. "When is Mom coming home?" he asked every morning. "I don't know," I answered, every time. The truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted her to come home. The woman who'd returned from Uganda wasn't the woman I'd married. Maybe she never had been. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "Meet me at the office. We have a problem." Mason's office felt smaller than usual, probably because it was crowded with legal documents, photographs, and what looked like surveillance equipment. "Owen Grant hired a lawyer," Mason said without preamble. "A good one. He's threatening to sue you for defamation." Let him try. Everything I said was true. Truth is a defense against defamation, but it's not a shield against harassment charges. Grant is claiming you're stalking him, that you've been following him, taking pictures, interfering with his work. Have you been following him? Of course I've been following him. That's what you paid me to do. Then let his lawyer prove it. Mason pulled out a manila folder. He seemed to have an endless supply of them. There's something else. Grant's lawyer contacted your wife. They want her to claim you've been mistreating her, that your accusations are part of a pattern of controlling behavior. I felt that familiar cold anger settling in my chest. And so far she's refused, but they're putting pressure on her, telling her it's the only way to save her career. What about Sarah Chen and Marcus Webb? Chen's husband filed for divorce yesterday. Webb's wife is standing by him, claims it's all a misunderstanding. Mason shook his head. People believe what they want to believe. What about the hospital investigation? Ongoing, but these things take time, and the hospital has a vested interest in keeping this quiet. Bad publicity hurts donations, and donations keep hospitals running. I stared out Mason's small window at the strip mall parking lot. A month ago, my biggest worry was whether the hospital's servers would survive the next software update. Now I was dealing with lawyers, private investigators, and the possibility that my wife might falsely accuse me of misuse to save her career. What do you recommend? I asked. Legally, keep your head down, don't contact Grant or any of the others, and let the system work. And personally? Mason smiled that unpleasant smile of his. Personally, I'd make sure Owen Grant understands that actions have consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that don't involve anything illegal, but make his life significantly less comfortable. I thought about Owen Grant's BMW, his golf club membership, his expensive house in Oakwood Heights. I thought about his arrogance, his assumption that he could destroy families without facing any real consequences. Tell me more, I said. The plan Mason outlined was simple, elegant, and completely legal. Owen Grant's reputation was built on his image as a successful, respected cardiologist. But reputations were fragile things, especially when they were built on lies. Grant plays golf every Saturday at Riverside Country Club, Mason explained. Same foursome, same tee time for the past 5 years. Very predictable. And country clubs are social environments. People talk, they gossip, they share information, especially when that information is juicy. You want to spread rumors? I want to spread facts. There's a difference. Mason had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Owen Grant's extracurricular activities. Not just the Uganda mission, but 3 years' worth of affairs, lies, and professional misconduct. The kind of information that would make even his golf buddies uncomfortable. The beauty of this approach is that it's all true, Mason continued. We're not making anything up, we're not exaggerating. We're just making sure the right people have the right information at the right time. And then we let human nature take its course. People don't like being associated with scandal, especially wealthy people who care about their reputations. Grant's social circle will start shrinking. His referrals will dry up. His patients will start asking questions. It was a long-term strategy, but it had the virtue of being both legal and devastatingly effective. Owen Grant had built his life on the assumption that his victims would stay quiet. We were about to prove him wrong. What about Tessa? I asked. What about her? Does she get the same treatment? Mason studied me for a long moment. That's up to you. She's your wife, the mother of your children. Destroying her career will hurt your kids too. He was right, of course, but I was tired of being the only one in my family who cared about consequences. Let me think about it, I said, but I already knew what my answer would be. Tessa had made her choice in Uganda. Now it was time for her to live with the results. 3 weeks after the gala, Owen Grant's life began to unravel in earnest. It started small. A canceled golf game here, a missed dinner invitation there. But by the end of the month, the pattern was clear. Riverside's social elite were distancing themselves from the disgraced cardiologist. Mason's information campaign had been surgical in its precision. A word here, a photograph there, always delivered to exactly the right person at exactly the right time. The president of the country club, whose own marriage had survived an infidelity scandal years earlier. The hospital board member whose daughter was a nurse. The wealthy donor whose wife had been propositioned by Owen at a fundraiser. It's beautiful to watch, Julia Grant said. We were sitting in her lawyer's office finalizing the divorce settlement that would leave Owen with significantly less than he'd expected. He actually tried to get the country club to intervene on his behalf. Can you imagine the arrogance? What did they say? They suggested he might be happier at a different club, preferably in a different state. Owen's medical practice was suffering too. Referrals had dropped by 60%, and 3 of his longtime patients had requested their files be transferred to other cardiologists. The hospital administration was making noises about restructuring his position, but it was the personal humiliation that seemed to affect him most. Owen Grant had built his identity around being admired, respected, envied. Now he was a punchline, a cautionary tale, a reminder that even successful people could destroy their lives through sheer stupidity. What about the others? I asked. Sarah Chen resigned from the hospital, Julia said. She and her husband are moving to Portland, trying to start over. Marcus Webb is in counseling with his wife, but his surgical privileges are under review. And Tessa? Julia's expression softened slightly. Still staying at her sister's house. Still hoping you'll take her back. I hadn't spoken to Tessa in 2 weeks, not since she'd called crying and begging for another chance. The conversation had ended with her screaming that I was destroying our family out of spite, and me hanging up on her. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being spiteful. But spite felt better than the alternative, which was admitting that 16 years of marriage had been built on a foundation I'd never really understood. She wants to see you, Julia continued. She asked me to ask you. Why would she ask you? Because I'm the only person in this mess who talks to both of you, and because she knows you won't take her calls. I looked out the lawyer's window at downtown Riverside. It was a small city, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Tessa and I would never be able to escape what had happened here. Every hospital function, every school event, every trip to the grocery store would be colored by the knowledge that our marriage had imploded in the most public way possible. What does she want to say? I don't know, but she's been calling me every day for a week. Whatever it is, she thinks it's important. I agreed to meet Tessa at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory where we could talk without the kids overhearing. She was already there when I arrived, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. What do you want, Tessa? I want to apologize. Really apologize, not just say I'm sorry because it's what you want to hear. Okay. She took a deep breath. What I did in Uganda was inexcusable. I betrayed you, I betrayed our children, I betrayed everything we built together. And then I lied about it, tried to minimize it, tried to make it seem like less than it was. Yes, you did. I know you're angry. I know you have every right to be angry. But Nick, we have 16 years together. We have 2 children who need both their parents. Doesn't that count for something? I studied my wife's face, looking for signs of the woman who'd kissed Owen Grant in a hotel hallway 3 months ago. She looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely sorry. But then again, she'd always been good at looking like whatever the situation required. It counted for something 3 months ago, I said. It should have counted for something when Owen Grant first started paying attention to you. It should have counted for something every time you took off your wedding ring and pretended you were single. You're right. I'm right? That's it? That's your big apology? Tessa's composure cracked slightly. What do you want me to say, Nick? I made a terrible mistake. I got caught up in something that felt exciting and new, and I forgot about everything that really mattered. I forgot about you, about Maddie and Will, about the life we'd built together. You didn't forget. You chose to ignore it. There's a difference. Fine. I chose to ignore it. I chose to be selfish and stupid and reckless. I chose to throw away 16 years of marriage for 7 weeks of meaningless flings with people I barely knew. Meaningless? Completely meaningless. It was just physical, just a way to escape the stress and the pressure and the constant exposure to death and suffering. I laughed, and it came out bitter. You know what's funny? That actually makes it worse. If you'd fallen in love with Owen Grant, if you'd had some deep emotional connection with him, at least I could understand it. But you threw away our marriage for meaningless hookups with a serial cheater. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what you've done? It's not just the cheating, Tessa. It's the lying, the manipulation, the way you've tried to make this my fault somehow. It's the fact that you exposed me to infections people usually don't talk about. It's the fact that our children now have to live with the knowledge that their mother is the kind of person who does these things. Tessa started crying. I know I hurt you. I know I hurt them. But people make mistakes, Nick. People do stupid things and then spend the rest of their lives trying to make up for them. Some mistakes can't be made up for. So that's it? 16 years of marriage and you're just going to throw it all away? I stared at her across the small table. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with in medical school. But she was also a stranger, someone capable of betrayals I'd never imagined. I didn't throw it away, Tessa. You did. 3 months ago in a hotel room in Uganda. Nick, please. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us. Tessa stopped crying and looked at me with something that might have been surprise. You don't mean that. I do mean it. I've already talked to a lawyer. I'm filing next week. What about the children? What about them? They'll adapt. Kids are resilient. They need both their parents. They'll have both their parents, just not in the same house. Tessa was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I love you, Nick. I know I have a terrible way of showing it, but I do love you. I loved you too, I said. Past tense. I left her sitting in the coffee shop and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. For the first time in 3 months, I felt something that might have been peace. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Tessa's lawyer tried to argue that her infidelity was irrelevant, that what mattered was the best interests of the children. My lawyer, Lisa Chang, disagreed. Your wife committed adultery with multiple partners, Lisa explained during one of our strategy sessions. She exposed you to infections transmitted through intimate contact. She lied repeatedly about the extent of her infidelity. And she did all of this while representing herself and the hospital as a medical professional on a humanitarian mission. Will that matter to the judge? It'll matter, especially when we present the evidence of her ongoing deception. The evidence was damning. Phone records showing continued contact with Owen Grant after they'd returned from Uganda. Credit card statements revealing secret meetings at hotels and restaurants. Text messages that made it clear the affair hadn't ended when the mission did. Tessa had lied to me one final time, claiming the affair was over when it had actually continued for weeks after her return. The custody hearing was the hardest part. Watching my children testify about their preferences, seeing the pain in their faces as they were forced to choose between their parents, was almost more than I could bear. But in the end, the judge's decision was clear. Primary custody to me, supervised visitation for Tessa until she completed counseling and demonstrated stability. The court finds that Dr. Ellery's actions demonstrate a pattern of deception and poor judgment that raises questions about her fitness as a custodial parent, the judge said. While the court does not wish to punish the children for their mother's mistakes, the evidence suggests that Mr. Ellery can provide a more stable environment. Tessa's face crumpled as the judge spoke. She looked across the courtroom at me with an expression of pure hatred. You've destroyed everything, she whispered as we left the courthouse. I hope you're happy. I wasn't happy. I was exhausted, angry, and sad about the waste of it all. But I was also free. 3 months later, Owen Grant left Riverside General under circumstances the hospital described as mutual agreement. He'd taken a position at a small clinic in Montana, about as far from his former life as he could get without leaving the country. Sarah Chen and her husband had indeed moved to Portland, where she was working as a general practitioner in a community health center. Marcus Webb had managed to keep his job but lost his surgical privileges and was reportedly drinking heavily. And Tessa had moved to Seattle, where she'd found work with a medical research company. She saw the kids every other weekend when she bothered to make the drive back to Riverside. I was sitting in my backyard on a Saturday afternoon, watching Will practice soccer kicks against the garage door, when Maddie came outside with a letter in her hand. This came for you, she said. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting wasn't. I opened the envelope and found a single sheet of paper with a brief message. Nick, I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I wanted you to know that I'm getting help. Real help. Not just the counseling the court ordered. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did and how I became the kind of person who could hurt the people she loves most. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect you to take me back. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become someone worthy of our children's love. Tessa. I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in my pocket. Maybe she was sincere. Maybe she really was trying to change. But it didn't matter anymore. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. Dad? Will had stopped kicking the soccer ball and was looking at me. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. Just thinking. About Mom? About a lot of things? Do you miss her? It was a complicated question with a complicated answer. I miss the woman I'd thought I was married to. I miss the family we'd been before Uganda. I miss the certainty of thinking I knew the person I'd chosen to spend my life with. But I didn't miss the lies, the betrayal, or the constant wondering what else she might be hiding from me. Sometimes, I said, but I think we're better off now. Will nodded and went back to his soccer ball. Maddie was in the kitchen making dinner with the competence of someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast. The house was quieter without Tessa, but it was also more peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia Grant. Owen's clinic in Montana just fired him. Apparently, he was caught with a nurse in a supply closet. Some people never learn. I smiled and deleted the message. Owen Grant was no longer my problem. Tessa was no longer my problem. The only problems I had now were the normal ones: raising two teenagers, keeping the hospital's servers running, and figuring out what the rest of my life was going to look like. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was honest. And after 3 months of lies and betrayal, honesty felt like the most valuable thing in the world. As the sun set over Riverside, I watched my children and felt something I hadn't experienced since before Tessa left for Uganda: contentment. The marriage was over, the revenge was complete, and the future, whatever it held, was mine to choose.